All right, it's 11 a.m. I'll call the meeting to order. First item we have on the agenda here is public comment. I don't see any members of the public here, so we'll go to the next item. Item 3, selection of chair and vice chair.
Yes, so we're supposed to do it at the last meeting of the year. We were going to have a meeting in December, but we didn't. So it's the first meeting after the last meeting of the last year. There is no rotation or anything else. It's just that you want people who feel comfortable being chair or vice versa. The chair, there's not a particular tradition on the committee. Yes. Bill Pinkham is the vice chair.
Traditionally, the chair has been an agency person rather than a civilian.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Well, if I may, I would motion that Robert, the acting chair, continue in his position with the current vice chair continuing in the role.
I'm fine with that.
Well, wait a minute. Bill Pinkham is a little long-winded sometimes. Maybe we could get a different vice chair. Not to say bad things about him, but to share the wealth. However, I don't volunteer.
Perhaps you could take the voting first for the chair and then for the vice chair.
Okay, we'll do that. Or maybe we'll wait a second here and wait for Sean and Paul to join us. That's okay.
How my day's going?
All right, we're going to take a vote on the chair of the CBPAC, and I guess nominated me to resume chair duties. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, I guess that's unanimous. So, I guess for the vice chair, anyone have any suggestions? All right, any other suggestions? All right. Actually, that'd be a question for Brad. Brad, if one is a vice chair, what are the duties as vice chair?
It's basically to serve in the place of the chair when the chair can't make it to a meeting. And that's it.
All right, I guess is Paul the only? I don't know if is that a recommendation or anybody else were. Yeah, I guess any final suggestions? No. If not, I guess we'll have to go with. I guess nominate Paul, I guess I'd take a vote here. All in favor of Paul Andrews as vice chair?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Paul will be or Pittsburgh will be vice chair. All right. The next item, item 4, approval of minutes. Approve the CBPAC minutes of October 24, 2016. Do I have any comments or a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
All right, have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. All right, move on to item 5, review of applications for second cycle PBTF funding. Brad?
Hi. Let me move this closer. We released a call for projects, as the packet says, back in September. And on December 9th, we received 76 applications. Well, 75. That's because one jurisdiction didn't submit its local streets and roads application. No, because it's by formula, we allowed them to submit a project later. There are a couple of different programs. There's a competitive portion of the One Bay Area grant. There's the local streets and roads, which is allocated by formula. There are safe routes to the school projects that are going to be allocated by the RTPCs. There's one federal aid secondary one. Goes to the county for rural roads. There's the Measure J TLC, or Transportation for Livable Communities, and then finally the pedestrian, bicycle, and trail facilities, which this committee reviews. So there are 76 applications, 16 for competitive OBAG, 20 for local streets, 1 for each jurisdiction, 11 safe routes to school, 1 federal aid secondary, goes to the county, 33 applications for transportation for livable communities, and 27 for PBTF. Now, if you add that all up, it's 107. And that's because sometimes the application, the sponsor would apply for both more than one funding source. So, for example, when we get to the PBTF, there were 27 applications, 27 projects, 8 of which asked for pedestrian, bicycle, trail facilities money as a match for OBAG money. 20 of them asked for just PBTF alone to make up their funding shortfall. And 1 project that asked for either pedestrian, bicycle, trail facility money as a match for OBAG or by itself. They'll do either. So there are basically those 27 projects, and they're listed in your packet. We put in a name. We gave them an ID, which is helpful to keep track of them. A short description, where they're located, and the amount of funding that they're requesting. Now, the funding request that's shown in the summary is the total funding request, and it could be made up of a combination of more than one funding source. But if you look at the final table, the request for PBDF funding, you'll see the specific request for that source of Measure J funding. So you, for example, see the first project, CCP01, we're calling it, the North Shore Bay Trail Gap Closure. The sponsor is Richmond. It's in West County. And you'll see the final 2 columns, 2.2. That means those are funds that in that column are funds that are being asked as a match for OBAG money. And then 3.1, those are funds that are being asked just for Measure J with no federal OBAG money as part of the request. And you'll see that there's project CCP31 in Hercules that is asking for PBTF money either as a match for OBAG or by itself. So altogether, there's about 7.6 million in PBTF money available, and there's a big amount of money being requested, something like 30 36 million. So we're talking about, I think it's about 378% more money asked for than available. So that means that there are a lot of projects to be reviewed. You'll see a copy of the scoring sheet that we've put together, and we've posted all the applications in folders listed by the ID numbers that we've given them on a Hightail website. And some people have been able to access that, and you all should have gotten invitations to share. Let me know if you have not gotten that invitation. And basically what we're asking is that members of this committee will review those applications and score them. I'm suggesting that we do that in the next month, that we hold another meeting in February to go over those as in the last time around, those that we'll go out and visit those top scoring the top scoring ones, and then make the final decision on which projects to recommend for PBTF funding. Now, with 27 applications to review, I was guessing that probably that's more than we should be asking any one of you to be reviewing, all 27. So we're suggesting that we split it into two groups and that no one review more than 13 or 14 of them. That way you wouldn't review any of the projects in your own region, since we'll assume that that's our suggestion anyway. That you obviously wouldn't review ones that you were yourself the sponsor of. And we'll make sure that every application is reviewed by at least 5 different people, and then we'll average the scores and get together and talk about them. So that's our suggestion, and if there are questions or alternative suggestions on how to review the projects, let me know, and if there are alternatives, we'd be happy to hear them.
I have one question, Brad. For the scoring sheet itself, when looking at the potential scores that could be assigned to each criterion, are there going to be, is this a final scoring sheet, one? And then secondly, if it's not, is there opportunity to introduce thresholds where, someone like funding leverage, if they have a certain amount of match, that would equate to in the range of 10 to 15, the highest amount of points, and if they only do 20 to 25% match, that's a different set of points as opposed to being so openly subjective.
Well, we hadn't discussed having sort of, as we're doing with the competitive OBAG, to have sort of direction. If you have 10% match, you get 1 point. If you have 100% match, equal amounts of funds requested compared to the funds the agency is putting forward themselves. You get the maximum amount. We hadn't talked about and discussed that here. I mean, that's certainly something we could do, but since it's kind of late in the game, I mean, if we agreed today to come up with some of those suggestions on how to score, we could, and I could revise this scoring sheet to do that. Last time around, we didn't do that. We didn't have sort of thresholds for a number of points.
I'm not sure what I haven't fully vetted the pros and cons in my own head, but I was just curious if that was going to be a rationale or not. But if that hasn't been past practice, then I guess it's been successful in the past.
I like the idea of going out and visiting the projects. How many would we go out and visit?
Well, we've got about $7.6 million to allocate, and we've got 36, roughly, in request. Assuming that they're equally spread out, that's about a quarter of the projects might get funded. So, what's six projects, 6 or 7 projects might get funded. So we might go out and visit, say, the top 10. I think that was what we did last time. Was the top 10 projects.
Yes, so I'm pretty new to the committee, but I'm seeing that these projects have a huge range of funding requested. Some of these would use up all the funding if we chose. How, in the past, have you tried to balance that? I mean, when you say 10, is there any weight toward the lower requests and trying to fit as many of those in, or do you really just look at trying to do one big one if that makes the most sense? And we could potentially only need to visit 1 or 2 if that were the case. So, not that I'm saying we should. I think there's value to doing more.
The last time we didn't really, at least not explicitly, try to do a larger number of projects. I know there are a couple of really big projects. There's one in Southwest County that's asking for $2.6 million. They were going to ask for more than that. That was their original request. Yeah, BART's another large one. And Pleasant Hill's got one that's $4.8 million. I think that's the largest one. Well, there's the one in San Pablo that's 5. So yeah, there's some really big requests for funding.
I thought there was a limit of $1 million that would be funded from at least the PBTF. And did I completely misunderstand that? We asked for like $1 million because we thought that was the limit.
No, I don't think there's.
Fair enough. Okay.
And then is that BART one too, they're asking for 2 different funding sources, TLC and I mean, have you guys tried to strategize at all on some of these where they're asking for multiple funding sources?
The BART one is the 931. Well, the process we're proposing is that we get a prioritized list of projects from every group that's going to be scoring project. We have an OBAG working group. They're going to score their projects in order. Then the RTPCs will recommend their projects for TLC and for Safe Routes to School. Though there are 2 of the 4 RTPCs got fewer requests than they have money available for Safe Routes to School. West County, definitely for TLC, they asked for it's not quite as bad as PBTF, but it's something like 2.5 times the request as the money they have available. And then this group would come up with a prioritized list. And since there are some projects that are asking for funding from either Measure J or from OBAG, and some of those projects might score well on all of them, that we might be able to fund some of the bigger projects through OBAG, which we'd like to do because we don't want to make people go through the Caltrans process if they don't have to. And then do some of the smaller ones, so it may look like you only can fund, say, 6 or 7 projects with PBTF, but maybe the 8th one down we might be able to because we'll fund it with OBAG. That's our hope, and we get the requests from the recommendations from the different scoring groups and then put together some kind of coordinated funding program that we'll send out for review in early April. And then make some adjustments after we get some responses from sponsors. So we to answer your question more directly, no, we haven't tried to spread the money out in any particular way. It is mostly on how well the projects do at meeting the criteria.
So our role is to score them on their merits or however we want to, and then we don't specify in our review whether we want to we would favor partially funding some of these big ones, or this is something that we then give back to you and then you make those decisions.
Well, certainly the committee could make that suggestion that you think that you know, and I can provide that information to you as more detailed information on exactly what the different projects are requesting funding for. And then when we discuss it, we can discuss whether we want to suggest that particular project should be funded only partially with PBTF. One of the other things we can do is, because there's usually a project that's at the bottom end, and they may have asked for $2 million, but there's only $1 million left. So we see what they can do, if they can put in more money themselves, or if they can rescope their project to be smaller, to make use of that smaller amount of money available. So there's always going to be some adjustment at the end of the process.
I'm trying to do that by proper protocol. As I recollect, 3 years ago, you did a really good job, Brad. We had a Excel spreadsheet, and you shaded where people were, or where projects were that had potential to get funded if anyone could fluctuate. And we did, I think we maybe started out with, let's say 8, and we got to 11 or something because we tweaked and asked people to make accommodations or do phase 1 and not phase 2 or something. So I felt like we squeezed it. We weren't trying to just do 2 projects to just be done. We were trying really hard to give everyone some funding if they qualified or looked like a reasonable project. And that's what I recollect. So I think the process worked. I think going and seeing the top projects worked. I don't think there were that many applications last time. I can't remember.
Not this many.
Yeah. And then not doing your own or any of your, like I'm West County, I wouldn't get any from West County, but having 14 is a lot. And between now and February 27th, is that the date? We would hopefully have reviewed our 14. Is that the idea?
That's what we're suggesting. Then that's one of the questions, is if you think 14 is too many. The way it would work, and I've tried to work something out, is to test this, whether it could work, is that if you want to have 5, if you want no one to review a project that's theirs or in their region, and if you want to have each project reviewed by at least 5 people, then it's going to be about 13 or 14 applications per person. It seems funny when I did it, but that's how it works out.
Is that assuming that the entire CBPAC is here? I mean, every member takes 14.
Yeah,
So
13 or 14.
13 or 14. I
mean,
can't
if you-
retain more than about 5 things in my head, and I'm sure you have a chart. I mean, you have the scoring sheets, but 14 just sounds like a lot.
Yeah, I've looked through looked through most of the 76. It's a lot, yeah. I mean, one of the reasons why we couldn't send everything out early is that a lot of the applications didn't have some of the pieces they needed to have, and there were some questions about them, and so we gave people until the end of the first week in January to make their corrections. And some of the funding plans changed as well. I think for one of them, the funding plan may change again if they can get some more local money.
Some of it looks overwhelming because I went through several of them. You know, some cities just attached a ton of stuff to their applications, but you know the basic information. You know, if there's project descriptions, there's budgets, and so it sounds like a lot, 14, but I don't think we're going to read every page of everybody's transportation element or whatever they attach to it.
It is true that there are a lot of some people would attach a whole plan and put it into their application. The scoring, the form, the application form itself isn't that overwhelming. If you try to read through everything that's attached, that can be overwhelming. Some were nice and they circled the policies that they think are important. In some ways, it's more important to know that they actually exist rather than you read the exact policies. For this application, I think for these projects, they didn't attach as many things because, especially for the competitive OBAG, there were a lot of things about whether the jurisdiction had particular kinds of policies. And those are the applications where they attached more stuff, more plan documents, specific plans, transportation, circulation elements, and the like. Though I do admit that 13 to 14 applications is not insubstantial.
I think Paul had a comment.
Yes. Well, I agree. 14 is a lot, but again, I think it's important that the reviewer doesn't review his own region's applications, which means we have to split it into two. So I don't, although it's a lot, I think that's what we should do. And I'd also like to request through the chair that staff look into what our minimum and maximum requests were, because I think in July of 2015 we discussed that. First round we had a minimum of $50,000 and a maximum of $2.5 million. So I think we discussed it back then, and I think we did come up with a recommendation for a maximum and minimum. So if you could check in.
I will check that.
Thank you.
You know, I was hoping to suggest that we not have to, everyone have to review 14, but if you think we could get away with just, each application being reviewed by 4 people instead of 5 or 6 people, then we could cut down on the number of applications that we each review. I can't tell you exactly how many we would cut it down.
Well, yeah, that would be, go ahead.
I would prefer to stick with more reviewers. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, is that you can probably get to the meat of the application in a few minutes just by reading the project summary. You don't necessarily need to know all the details and background and policies to be able to score the project with the criteria we have here. So it seems pretty daunting, but I think in reality, once you get into it, it's not going to take that long. And I'm saying that having worked on the one for Orinda, for our project. I reviewed it after our public works folks got to it, and it didn't take very long to review it. I mean, I was somewhat familiar with it, but I think the project description and the maps can give you the gist of it pretty quickly.
Joanna, you had a comment?
Yeah, I'm bouncing this around and thinking, well, first of all, a lot of them, 56% of them come from West County, so maybe I won't have to do 14. But also...
No, you will.
Okay.
That's the determining factor, is that there were 14 projects that weren't in West County.
Yeah, well, there are plenty to review. Because I'm a little familiar with some of the West County ones, I almost feel like in order to give it justice, I want to see, like, the scoring sheet, destinations served, and, I don't know if there's a local support. There's some things that, like, it's almost like I have to review all of them to know how they match up against each other in order to be fair. Does that make sense? I'm not going to review all of them. I'm not. But I don't know. There's a part of me that feels like if I review areas I don't know, I won't be biased because I don't know them. But I will be less informed if I don't review West County because I'm not sure we don't, I don't think there is a community of concern component here in any of this.
No, there isn't.
Okay.
Actually, communities of concern is mentioned on the latent demand.
Oh, good. Because in San Ramon, there's not that many issues around community concern, and yet just about every one of them in West County could probably qualify under that. So I don't know. I'm venting, overwhelmed, and trying to figure out a way to do it so it's fair, or as fair as possible.
Well, I think maybe the first question for the group to answer is what the minimum number of reviewers per application would be. Is it, it could be 3, could be, if it's 5, then everyone's going to have to review 13 or 14. If it's 3, it's going to be down to more like, I'm guessing 8 or 9 instead. But that's just a guess on my part right now.
Actually, Brad, I have a question. How many people total are in the CBPAC?
13.
Okay.
Is that right? 8.
Yeah, while I also do not want more work than I can handle, I just feel that 3 is way too low of reviewers, just to be fair to everybody's application. That's just a comment, but 5 might be a magic number there.
Paul?
I'd actually like to agree with the 5 minimum. But I'd also like to point out that the idea of scoring these applications, we'll have a numerical score for each project. We can average those. But then we're going to take the top 10, and we'll take a field review of those top 10. So we don't necessarily have to go in that priority order of the scoring, the numerical score. Is that correct? Otherwise, what's the point of doing the field trip? So those could be adjusted by the committee. Is that a fair statement?
Well, the last time around, everyone reviewed everything, and then we came up this average score, and then we discussed the average score. I think there might have been some minor adjustments, but then we said, oh, okay, of the top 10, I think it was about 10, I can't remember exactly. And we thought, well, we can't fund all 10, but let's go look at the top 10 and see if there are any problems with any of them. And the group did find some issues with at least a couple of the projects that resulted in them not being funded. They got funded, planning for one of them got funded elsewhere, but so there was this average that came out of the first round, And then there was some adjustments to that top list after the field reviews. And that's why the field reviews were important, that it did adjust the scores.
I'm doing a little math over here, don't ever trust it. But if there are 13 CBPAC reps and there's 27 applications and there's 5 applications per rep, I think somehow it comes out to 10.384 applications. I don't know if that's right. You might want to check it. So we might be not talking about 14 applications.
Well, all I can say is that I'll check my spreadsheet again, but I did do an initial allocation of applications amongst the group, and it might be that there are only 11 of us now I think about it. 18.
There are 5 name tags left.
And there are 8 of us here, so that's 13. Eight from the regions, 2 from the county, and then Park District, East Bay Bicycle Coalition. There's one more, and why am I forgetting? But that's the 13.
I will say 10 sounds a lot nicer.
Should we agree on the 5 minimum reviewers for each application?
Yeah, I like 5, but does anybody else?
And maybe
Yeah.
I can, if that's the case, maybe I can get it down to 12. I'll try to get 5 for reviewers for each application, and the minimum number of applications for each reviewer to review.
I can agree with that. I'd like to have at least 5 reviewers per application, no matter how many that means for each person.
Okay.
Through the chair, just a clarification, the review is the review of the paperwork, right? We don't have to, on our 14, go out in the field and check them ourselves and determine whether we think it's a good application for the on-the-ground portion. We just have to determine whether they were a good writer when it came to creating the paperwork for the application.
That was my assumption as well.
Okay.
Yeah, it's that they've convinced you that you should give them a high score on these different criteria.
Okay.
From what they've submitted in their application.
Okay.
So you think, filling in these sidewalk gaps in Concord and adding a bike route is a good project. I'm trying to remember if that's actually a TLC project. If you're convinced that that's a good project, you'll give it a high score, and then when we average them out, it'll end up being a higher score.
Okay, so further clarification. No, that's okay. Okay, sorry.
Any other comments, questions?
So the math is if we spend an hour per application, that's 14 hours, say. That's 2 work days.
If that's how much time you spend on each, or it's 1 work day if you only spend a half hour. I found that the first one takes the hour, and the later ones take much less time because you know what you're looking for, and you're doing your comparisons in your head. That's been my experience.
Right, Sean?
But yeah, it's not insubstantial.
Yeah, Sean.
Thanks. So by February 27th, we will have reviewed these applications, and so then at some point after that, we will be doing the field review, or So we don't need to do the field review before the 27th is my question, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right. That we wouldn't do the field review until this group has gotten together and discussed the scores and decided which projects we should go out and visit.
Okay, thanks.
If I could point out, in the countywide bicycle application process, project process, each of the committee members is expected to go out and visit some so that they have an idea of what is on the ground and they compare that to what is in the paperwork. And then we discuss how to improve the application. We're not trying to improve the applications here.
No, we're not. We didn't adopt the same process. I will say that I have found that Google Street View is useful in some of that review if you don't have a chance to get out. It doesn't cover everything. There are a lot of the trails that don't have Street View. And a lot of people have taken pictures and put them into their applications. Though I will say Google Street View is actually better than a static photograph, but still.
Do we send our questions about our applications to you, so you ask them, like, let's say City of San Ramon has an application and I don't understand something about it, I don't go and contact the applicant, I contact you, and then you get the question to them and get back to me before the 27th? Which means we should have these done probably the week before that or something? Or do we wait till we bring it all back and talk to the other 5 and maybe they can answer, the other 4 reviewers?
It's probably best if you send the questions to me, then I can send your question and the answer that I get back to everyone, so that everyone who's reviewing that application will know what the answer is.
All right, Cynthia?
Brad, you mentioned, or maybe Joanna, you mentioned a spreadsheet that had been shared in previous years that kind of showed all the different scorings from previous projects. I think it would be really great for those of us who are doing this for the first time to see that, if it's possible to share.
Do you mean the scoring
The final
compilation
scorings from
last time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could send that out.
Thank you.
Actually, Brad, just to add to that, in addition to the Excel sheet, anything else you think that would be useful from the last go-round with PBTF, if you could send that out as well, that'd be great.
Okay, I'm writing this down.
Okay, thank you. And have a comment from Greg?
Yeah, I think it's more of a question for Brad. Do you think that there's enough, and assuming we're not familiar with the project area, which we might not be since we're not reviewing projects in our area, is there enough information in the application to be able to score this objectively? I'm reading the criteria again, and I'm just, if we're not familiar with an area at all, and we're trying to look at connectivity and destinations, I don't remember the application asking for that much detail. I'm just wondering how easy this is going to be with these criteria.
Well, that's always going to be an issue. How much do you know about the area? Do you know? I think it wasn't this time around. I think it was the previous one. This what was called the CMA block grant process, which was done back in, when was it, 1999, something like that. When we got to the end of the process, someone who was familiar with the projects said, "Oh, you you guys gave this money, you're recommending this money go to this project, but it's not a very good project because it's in there, they happen to live in that community. Not that it wasn't a bad project, but it was that it was incomplete and it left a big gap that was going to be bad. So there's a kind of flip side, being from a different era, reviewing a project, you may not be completely familiar with the context of the project. How can you score it? At least it's not as bad as if you're from the Bay Area and you're reviewing projects in Los Angeles, which the reviewers for the ATP project were doing. That's even worse. Or if you're reviewing something in Imperial Valley, a place that I've never been. Anyway, the application questions are the same, are related to all the criteria. So, as Bruce pointed out, and to a certain extent, it's how well their writing is, how good their writing is, and how persuasive it is. Sometimes, if you happen to know about the area, you do read into what they say, even though they don't say it. And that's sort of that's the reason why you have multiple reviewers, is to make sure that on balance, that you'll get a good score. I trust everyone here to be fair and reasonable in their review.
All right, John?
How do you propose splitting up the projects today?
What I was going to suggest is that once I got agreement on the way to do it, that I would go through and split it up so that people wouldn't review their own projects, wouldn't review projects in their area, and that the projects they do review would be sort of split up among throughout the county, so they wouldn't be focusing on any one particular area, and that I would try to finish that up today and send out the list to everyone.
James?
Did the affirmation of the number of reviewers require a motion to answer the question?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm just going to get in the weeds again. Is there anyone else? Okay. Backing up from February 27th, which is when we would come back here with the process that we discussed of having all the projects based on all the compiled information you get back from us. So we have to have that compiled information back to you before February 27th, like a week before.
Oh, it doesn't have to be a week before. All I need are those scoring sheets, one for each application, sent to me, on that Thursday or Friday before. It doesn't take too long for me to compile it.
And if we have any questions to the applicant, we should get that to you probably a week before the scoring sheet so you can get the answers and get them back to us. So really we have like 2+ weeks to review whatever you give us today at the end of the day or something. Is that right? Okay.
It's a little more than 2+. Well, I haven't counted the days, but
I'm just trying to see if we're realistically looking at February 27th, which, because I think this all goes to the CCTA board sometime March or April, right? I mean, you have a...
No, it's the dates are, we're meeting today in January, have another meeting in February to go over the scores. I mean, if you think that that's not enough time, we could delay it until early in March.
I was going to ask that too. Like, is there a reason why we need to have it on February 27th, or can we bump it a week or two? Because I mean, the next one after is like March. Was it 20?
It's only because this meeting is set for the fourth Monday of every month, just because it's everyone's got that day sort of set, and it's an easier day. I mean, we could, in theory, move it to a different day. That's certainly possible, and then set the tour, say, for the March CBPAC meeting date, which is, I can't remember, it's March 20-something. If you think that if you'd like to have a little more time, we can try to reschedule I can try to reschedule the meeting date.
All right, Sean?
I mean, just checking the calendar, I'm counting this week, that's 5 weeks that we have to review them.
Paul? Okay.
When does CCTA need to take them to the board? Or, well, actually, yeah, it goes to the board.
Well, the schedule, I've got part of it in the packet. Let me go back to it. The schedule is that we'd have a special meeting on the 27th and do the tour of the top-ranked projects, if we decide to do that, in mid-March, and do our final recommendation on the 27th. I mean, those two could be the same date. That's what happened the last time. We had the tour in the morning and came back here in the afternoon and made the final recommendation. After that, staff will take all the recommendations from all the groups, put together a package, a funding package. In April, send it out for review in April and get comments back. And then in May, it would go to the Technical Coordinating Committee for their review. And then June, the authority and the Planning Committee and the authority would review and approve that whole package.
Brad, just because you mentioned it, I guess for the kind of obviously yes, but with the tour, and I guess if we have it on the same day as the March PBTF, the CBPAC meeting, I guess we should expect to have block out the whole day.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we have a 12-person van, so it'd be great if somebody didn't make it.
Through the chair, could I ask staff, Brad, could you define fairness? And if I go out and visit some of these sites that I have no clue about because they're in West County, is that going to, and my having visited the site, is that going to change the definition of fairness then?
I wouldn't think so. If any of the reviewers want to visit a place that they're not that familiar with, I think it's fine. I mean, your review, if you're going to do that, if you're trying to do it so that you have a knowledge of the context of the project for all the applications you're reviewing, so that you feel like you're equal, you have the same understanding of where the projects are for all the applications. I think what you're in essence trying to do is be fair to all those applications so that your scores within what you're scoring are based on comparable level of knowledge. So I don't think so. I may go out myself to review some of these. I'm pretty familiar with most parts of the county. Though admittedly, I'm a little more aware of Central County now since I've been here for so long. I mean, if other people have, I mean, if you think it's inappropriate to go out and look at project sites.
I would say that it's more informative for the reviewer, so by all means.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Any other questions or comments to Brad? All right, I guess the last thing, just I guess we finalize, we're going to have, I guess we'll each review five applications.
No.
I mean, review by 5 people, sorry, had that mixed up, yeah. Review. Yeah, so.
It'll be the minimum number of applications you need to review so that each is reviewed by at least 5.
At least 5, okay.
That's right.
If you have a tie you need a break in terms of giving somebody more, I'm happy to take on more.
Thank
I'll
you.
volunteer.
You can take my .38.
All right, I guess we're done with this item 5 here. I guess we'll move to, the best item here, item 6, lunch. So we'll have lunch, and I guess we'll re-adjourn at 12:15.
Understand who's involved and what's going on. I'm not going to do Oh, I know I can. But this would be a good one to have you able to see who's at the table. Yeah. So I understand better. Yeah, that's right. Our representative over. Oh, yeah. Well, I know he's our representative. I knew his name, but like, oh, that's our guy. But I haven't met him yet, so. So I think I have 2 questions, comments. One is on the Martinez and this material has them listed as TLC. And I know we've had this conversation. It seems like we're different things where we've got to get that up in the system. Is it a TLC or not? Like on the one, maybe it was the memo that I just sent out. It had that as, it said we had 9 TLC projects where we were saying, we did have the Martinez. So check that. And then the other question I had, both of these were that oh, it's hard. I know it's hard. You're trying to sort it out like it's reading all of them. Find out 4 or 5 things. And then they change. The other one was for the Pleasant Hill. They had the Contra Costa Drive from isn't that also eligible for, couldn't you do OBAG and PBTF as a match? Did they have to put something, because right now
they also asked for PBTF, and it's kind of was, one of the sorts you had was, it's all PBTF or nothing, and I thought, well, why couldn't they do a match of PBTF against OBAC if that was its best?
It depends on, well, yeah, but that depends on what they ask for.
Well, that's what I'm wondering.
For example, I might see a take across the school. They ask for OBAG, competitive OBAG, and they ask for deals. But they could have asked for safety for school. Because it's very much a safety for school.
It was just sort of annoying.
Okay.
Well, I guess I didn't know, as I looked through the application, I wasn't sure how you would have indicated. I don't want this as matched, but I want the PLC as matched. Well, provided a couple of people say, okay, this amount,
Why don't we match either with PLC or PPAC? You put in the same amount.
it just seemed like, for this project, I was like, I would have wanted to shout, hey, give me OBAG, whatever cost it's eligible. The predictions, I'll look at the. Well, city money versus regional money versus countywide money.
Well, there's basically you control whatever.
Yes. No,
So, you know, they're not small. In our way of thinking, it's always better to have a sponsor, right? Is that a requirement? Is that a requirement? Put there some skin in the game. And that's why you look at the San Ramon project. They're asking for the maximum amount of competitive events. They're asking for all of the Southwest County share, pretty much.
they're trying to run
and
the
2.9 million is PBTF.
That's a big
And no,
That's a big
and no,
no.
they have a match of 411,000. It might have been 2.5.
No, I understand.
Now, and that's just because previous, especially for $14 million project, you're not putting in any money.
The transfer point is a quarter mile from the quarter mile further. Anyways.
I'm gonna get, are you not,
As a
I was just asking the
civilian
states.
goes into or out of transfers.
Yeah, you can have some lunch. So is it only 2 years?
No, that's what that's a sandwich.
Then you, okay, make a deal. Stay for the rest of the year.
13, that's the magic number. Alarm will sound if you try to get out of the transfer.
Time is valuable. If your city goes another hour. Yeah, no, you should eat something. That's going from one place to another. I was thinking of the lunchtime. It's exciting. Keep it in your memory.
When is it going to open? A year from now, tell us or not. December 2017 or January 2018 was the best guess about a month ago. I don't know what the best guess is now. For the part extension for Teddy's to the department that you bought. Yeah, you got it.
It's gonna be a while.
yeah, please. Mr.
No, that's that.
Gary Richards, the columnist in the newspaper, is holding a contest to figure out the data that's going to go. And he's offering like $10 worth of e-book tickets to the winner. You can only enter once a week.
The Richmond Bridge bike window, that seems like we're just getting pushed farther and farther into the future.
And they got some serious bike lane construction to do off the end of the bridge on the Marin side. Yeah, as well as on the Contra Costa side too. We're going to lose the bike lane totally when they make the 3 lanes in the other direction.
It's one in Indy Bridge. It's a windy bridge. It's going to be great to be able to finally get across it. We get to learn a great company out of that driver. Potentially. That'll be a milestone. All the years of going over there with mountain bike, having to drive over there. Bike across it. If you have a continuous with the bike from the large station.
Yeah, that would be very good.
Yeah, you make your way down to the Great Trail somehow. Del Norte, it's not that far. It's not a great ride either. We have the Greenway. The Ohlone Greenway? Well, it connects to the Richmond Greenway. There's that. Harbor? Difficult connection across the street. Yeah, it's definitely sometimes like going on Google Street View and seeing what places look like in the country. Oh. There's so much arrow freaking around. Even freeways. Trying to find a street like a tree. All right. What else? It's not. They used to in Europe. In fact, we have those cousins in Italy. We went to visit. He said that you have to get a special permit now to put in the stoplights because everything's roundabouts there. Which I think is great. I think there's so much better having a stoplight. Boy, if they want people to get upset. It could be tough to ignore in this country. And there is a difference between a traffic circle and a roundabout.
have the inauguration. Let me tell you.
In the Bay Area, there weren't that many people. You could say that. You say.
I'm surprised. Talking to certain people, and most of my people that I surround myself with never talked about this stuff, or against him. But occasionally there'll be someone who's just like, I don't appreciate it. In the Bay Area. You must have spoken to some value within them at some point. Outweighed all the rest, yeah.
You're doing a great job as chair.
All right, thanks. No, I mean, this is basically the project back now. Set it up no comment.
Not to beat a dead horse, but if we score the ones we know about, then we have more knowledge of that one and whether it's a good project. But that leaves room for bias to be introduced.
Yeah, Brad said he doesn't think we'll be biased, but I think in those cases it could be hard not to be.
All right, well, we'll reconvene the meeting here. We have the next item is item 7, public outreach and data collection for update of the countywide bicycle and pedestrian plan. We have with us today is it Megan Mittman from Fair and Piers, and she'll be discussing this update.
Yes.
All right,
I'll just do a quick introduction.
Okay.
Yes, Megan's here. She's the project manager for Fair and Piers on the update to the countywide bicycle and pedestrian plan. And in your packet, there are a couple of things. One is the sort of the management and public outreach plans for the update. And in the back, there is a memo that it's a draft memo that we're hoping to send out after your concurrence to all the jurisdictions, asking them for information on bicycling and and walking in their communities, their plans and policies, and their infrastructure. So with that, I'll turn it over to Megan, and she'll give you some more details.
Thanks, Brad. Good to see you all, and Happy New Year. So this is an update. I was here at the last meeting, which was in November. Yep. Yeah, where we just talked about the scope of work and kind of getting underway for this. And so this is a bit of a summary of what we've been up to since I was last here, and also really the first big request we have of you all and of the other jurisdictions within the county for a lot of the data and input that we're going to need. So I won't spend too much time on attachment A, which is just the management plan and outreach plan. That's basically just operationalizing the aspects of the scope of work that we talked about when I was here last. It's more kind of an internal document where we assign different roles and responsibilities to that. We talk about the frequency of check-in meetings that we're going to be having and some of the kind of who's on point from the various firms. And it does have a summary of the different outreach activities that we're going to be planning, but I do think we went through those with the scope of work discussion last time. I'm definitely happy to go through any of those again if anybody has any questions. I think the majority of our time should focus on the memo, which is attachment B. There's a few things that we've been working on and are kind of ready to go live, and that we're going to need some support in terms of getting the word out and also getting some of the data. And so that's the draft local jurisdiction data request and plan involvement memo. So there's a few different pieces. On the first page, we talk about the near-term involvement. So this is basically things that are ready to go right now. The first is a data request. We need just a big GIS data dump, basically, from all of the different jurisdictions. Our understanding is that's our best approach to be able to get the most current, most recent data that's out there. And you'll see on pages 2 and 3 of that memo, we've set up a Google Drive link for each individual jurisdiction so that it'll be really easy to go there and to move the GIS files into those folders. So hopefully that is a good way of us knowing kind of who sent in the files and who we've received files from, and could be a convenient way to store all of those. So there's a list of the files that we need. We've tried to cull those down to only the ones that we think are best requested from the local jurisdiction. We also have a lot that we've requested from CCTA directly. So these more represent the ones that we think there may be more current data available directly from the cities. The second request is, go ahead. Yeah, yes.
Hi, while we're on that item, I just wanted to point out East Bay Regional Park District is not on that list with a link.
Okay,
so
we should add that.
Yeah,
Great,
if you want to add that.
Thank you. So the next piece is that we have a website up and running. There's a landing page that's live right now, and I'm going to hand out a handout in a second here. Should have got one for you, Amy?
That's fine. I've seen it before.
So this is just
Megan,
yes.
sorry to interrupt. I think there's a member in the audience who'd like one. Thanks.
So this is going to be ready to go live in a couple of days. We got the final draft from Circle Point at the end of the day on Friday. But this is essentially what the website is going to be programmed to look like, and the request that we have from all of you is to help us to promote it. So the website is in the memo, and what we're asking is if you can put kind of redirect to this on your individual city's web pages, and any type of social media that you have access to, making sure that there's an alert that goes out about that. In particular, on the website is an interactive web map, and the link to that directly is also in the memo. That is live and up and ready to go, and that's one of the earliest forms of public engagement that we have for the plan. This is just an opportunity for people to be able to note where they have concerns walking and biking, and also where they have ideas for places that improvements can happen. And it should be pretty intuitive. It kind of feels like a Google map. So there's dots and lines that you can draw. So we would appreciate your help in kind of getting the word out around that new website, and in particular the interactive web map that will be on the website.
That web map is going to be open to everyone because we want to use it as a way to get information from the general public on where they bike or where they walk, where they don't walk, where they think there need to be improvements. It's a technique that's being used. Farron Piers has used it in various other places like Stockton. The District 4 bike plan is going to be using a similar map. Don't be confused. There are going to be different processes, but we hope that you and will spread the word on that map.
Oh, no, thank you. To follow in a couple of weeks is going to be a Survey Monkey that we're calling the benchmarking survey. And this is really the way that we're going to do the programs, practices, and policies assessment and update for all the different local jurisdictions. And we have all of those questions finalized. We just now need to put it into survey format, so it should be coming pretty soon. We are going to need to make sure we know who the right point person in each of the local jurisdictions is for that. And so if that's not you, if it should be somebody else, then you should let Brad know. And then you're also going to be asking all the cities directly who are not represented here for that. It's going to have an opportunity you'll be able to kind of log in and log back out, because there may be some questions that you'll need multiple people within the city to provide some feedback on. But that's going to be our main opportunity to ask things like, do you have a dedicated pedestrian bicycle coordinator on staff? What has your funding level been? What are the things that you're doing enforcement-wise and education-wise in the city? We have tried to restrict the questions to be things that are not obviously available on cities' websites, so we're not trying to kind of we want to be able to do that work directly ourselves. So these are more digging a bit deeper. There's also opportunities to either email us links or to upload links if we're asking questions like, do you have local design guidelines for bicycle standards or for pedestrian standards? So things like that can be uploaded or can be sent to us separately. So that's the next big request that's going to come out, and that'll be ready in a couple of weeks. And then just to give you a heads up for things that will follow on that process, once we get all of the GIS data in, we're going to be basically creating a big consolidated map of everything for both the existing facilities that are out there as well as proposed facilities that are in current plans. And we're going to be using the same interactive web map platform that we have up right now for the public to be giving their feedback as a way to get the local jurisdictions to essentially QC the map, right? That was definitely some feedback that we heard from the last plan was, if the base map itself isn't correct, then it's really hard to build on in terms of the plan. So we're going to be pulling all of the layers together that everyone uploads for us, and then we're going to go back out and say, did we get it right? Is there anything that's, maybe 6 months old in this data that we now want to update? And so there'll be chances to put in comments within the interactive web map to make sure that we have the correct base layer before we build on it. That's a good question.
Oh, actually, Paul had a question or comment.
I had a question. The memo that you're sending out to jurisdictions, who's it going to go to, and why isn't it in a letter format?
Well, it could go, and we can certainly put it into a letter format.
We're trying to also, again, with
I'm
this
not-
memo, we're also trying to get a long-term point person
That's right.
for bike ped plan.
Well, the idea is that we would send it out to
City.
the people in the jurisdictions who would be most likely to know about this.
You have that
Probably
list?
the letter would go in your case, in Pittsburgh's case, it would go to you. It would go to, the one thing about having a memo, it's a little easier to send out, and we would send it out to multiple people. I was thinking city manager, public works director, and then people that we know are involved in each jurisdiction with these sorts of issues, and like the planning director.
Okay. Again, my concern is that we're not going to get all responses from all the jurisdictions in a timely manner. So sounds like you already have thought of that.
Yeah, getting
Giving it to multiple,
responses from everyone is always an issue.
and I'm sure there will be follow-up as far
Yes.
as phone calls,
Yes, I'm sure there will be follow-up.
emails. Thank you.
Quick.
James, then Sean.
Okay, yeah,
so
go.
James.
You were first.
On the point of responsiveness, I wonder if, just as a comment or a suggestion, it may be helpful to include timeframes in the memo of expectations for when this data should be available or should be provided, at least even mid-March or something like that.
Just to help with people prioritizing their time on it, that makes sense.
Okay, Sean.
Thank you. Excuse me. For the GIS data, projection type of data, shapefile, I'm guessing, is that information on these links, or should we just give you what we got and hope that your GIS staff can make it all work?
It's not, these links are just folders, so there's
Okay.
not any information in there. I think that if that would be helpful to provide, that wasn't part of the request that we gave you all. We just kind of asked for the list of data.
It's for the shape files.
Okay.
Or Excel files, or database files that would be as linked to the shape files. And all the other associated GIS files. If your question is about projections, which projections we're going to be using, I mean, we'll have the ability to
reproject that.
To take your data, and if we know what projection you're using, we can shift it to a new projection. That's one of the great things about GIS, that we can do that.
Is there any other advice you all have on helping with the responsiveness and just making sure that we're getting this to the right people? Is there a process that's been used in other projects that's been helpful for that?
We can bring it to our tax. So whenever, did you say that already?
We didn't say that already, but, well, we have said that in earlier meetings, that one of the things that's going to be a next step in the process is that we're going to be setting up meetings with each of the RTPC tax where we'll go out once we get some of this baseline information, have some sense of where issues might be, that we'll go out and talk to the tax and ask them basically how we're going to harmonize their various plans. Because there may be disjunctions among the planned facilities at the edges of the cities. What we're trying to get is a harmonized countywide set of policies and maps. So those, we haven't set the meetings up, but we will be setting up in a couple of months.
But we're hoping to have all the data in and consolidated before we have those, so that those can be more kind of reacting to some initial ideas rather than just open request type meetings.
I just have a question, and apologies if I missed the date on here. I guess when is this memo going out? Is it just like right after this meeting? And two, when do you need the data, GIS data, back by?
We want to send out the memo this week, but you're right. It does need to have some deadlines to get people to know that when we want to get the information, so that we can move on to the next steps in the process.
Does 2 weeks sound right? A month sound right? When you receive this, what's going to feel reasonable to you? A month. Okay.
Yeah, I think a month would be all right, unless anybody else has any problem with it. Okay, I think a month.
And this will be the busiest time of that, because there's going to be multiple rounds of these requests that'll come in within the first couple months, and then it should be pretty quiet while we're doing the work, and then there'll be another wave of, okay, now we need you to react to all of it.
Cynthia?
I have a question regarding the public feedback that you're requesting, specifically the interactive map.
Yep.
Just looking at it, I was wondering if two people have an opinion about the same intersection, is it possible for somebody who has already somebody who is seeing an existing comment to just vote on that comment, or do they have to submit their own additional comment?
The platform that we're using, you're only going to see yours, so it'll kind of show up as a blank map when you do it, but on the back end, we'll be able to see it cumulatively, and we'll be kind of creating heat maps that show if there's multiple comments on the same.
Okay. And since Caltrans is going through a similar process right now, have you been talking with them about maybe being able to access the data that they receive just to add to it? Because, I mean, we're asking a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. We haven't discussed that. I will see it because I'm on the District 4 Bike Plan TAC, so I'll be aware of the information, and I can talk to Sergio to see about getting that information for Contra Costa. That's a good point.
Are they ahead of us, or are we ahead of them on the map process?
They're slightly ahead.
Okay. They already have their map out.
Not yet,
Okay.
but I have access to it, but it's not public yet. When I say I have access to it, it's not like I'm a special person particularly, but because I'm on the TAC, the TAC members have access to it.
Yeah, you have access to that map just like we have access to this map.
Yes, that's right.
Any other questions?
Bruce?
Yeah, through the chair. So I'm a little bit concerned about the point person to get the map information back from is a 40-hour-a-week employee, and a quality job would be 80 or 100 hours, maybe. I'm not sure. He doesn't have, or she doesn't have that kind of time, so they're going to spend 3 hours on it. And I'm thinking it's not going to be the highest quality that the bicyclist would want to see, but the consultant is going to assume that it's gold-plated information and go from there. How are we going to deal with that? This is not to badmouth our point people, right? But I already said, some communities just, the people, the employees just don't have the time to give you the quality of information that you're asking for. So do we weigh the quality of information that comes in? I think that's
a question for me. Let's not put Megan on the spot for this one. The survey is pretty technical. It's going to ask questions about things that those point people will know. It will ask a question, for example, do you have a committee that specifically looks at bicycle pedestrian issues? Like, do you have a BPAC? Or do you have a circulation commission that looks at bicycle and pedestrian issues as well as other ones? I mean, that question is a very simple question to answer. Another question is going to be, when you design a bicycle or pedestrian facility, what standards do you use? What best practices documents do you refer to? And there's a whole list. And then they can easily go through and say, oh, I never look at that, so I'm not going to check it. This one I always check. That's the level of questions. Those are things that those point people should know pretty easily. I don't think there are any questions that are particularly difficult for them to answer. Now, in terms of the interactive mapping, those are things that that map is intended for users and people who know from their own experience where there are places that they ride, places they would like to ride, places where they have issues. And that's a different set of questions, and it's a different kind of input that we're asking for. So I think when we get information back from the survey of local staff, that there may be questions that we'll have to go back and ask them about. It's not like we're going to assume that everything that we get back to them is 100% accurate, but a lot of the questions are about things that they do, so they should know what it is that they do. That's our take on it.
Yeah, all right. Thank you. I think I misunderstood the initial statement, and I retract my criticism.
That wasn't that bad. That wasn't criticism.
And I think we're hoping on the GIS data request side that these are just layers that already exist, right? And some of them we do have from CCTA. I think just the thought is that to the extent that the local jurisdictions have more recent, that we want to go there to make sure that we have the most recent rather than maybe a couple years old version of it.
Through the chair, one more thing. Okay, so the community, and I am not criticizing Pittsburgh. We love Paul, okay? But, no, this is for a different community of which I know. So the point person will reply, yes, we have a circulation committee, and yes, all the bicycle information gets run through the circulation committee, but there are no bicyclists on the circulation committee, so we don't get good quality information from the circulation committee. What do you think about then on the quality of information? Our point person gave you a true statement, and yet the information isn't any good. Well, I won't say no good, but the motorist doesn't have a clue, sadly, many times. And here again, this is implied criticism. I don't want to criticize because we are in fact creating a bicycle document that is hopefully going to be good.
I mean, the question that we're asking is really as simple as, do you have a circulation committee? It doesn't ask what's it made up of, who's on it, are they we're not asking that
doesn't
question.
ask, is your circulation committee any good? We assume it's good. Well, I'm not assuming it's good, but we are assuming it's good. And so my criticism is implied. I'm sorry.
It's not implied. I would say that it's not implied. I mean, the purpose of the questions are to get some basic information. We're not trying to evaluate some of it. I mean, we'll end up evaluating the actual data on sidewalk gaps and bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure planned and existing. That's going to be evaluated. We'll look at that and compare it to other information, and that information is going to be made public, so people will be able to weigh in on that as well. But, I mean, we're trying not to make judgments on how a jurisdiction has set up its advisory committees.
Paul?
And I was just thinking, if Bruce is still concerned about this when we have a draft report, perhaps we could add some footnotes or something in certain statements that reflect that unknown issue.
Cynthia?
Thank you. I think that maybe part of what I'm hearing is, how do we go beyond the survey, and how do we go beyond just the impression of one staff person? So maybe it's a question of what other information can be gathered as part of this process that will provide other perspectives as to the state of the bicycle network and the pedestrian network. So maybe it's, an evaluation of a city's bike plan, or an evaluation of the implementation of a city's bike plan and how much progress has been made on the implementation of a bike plan. It could also be, looking at some recent complete streets projects that a jurisdiction has completed, and seeing how much work a city is putting in to create complete streets and to complete the network, the bikeway network.
And I think that is our hope, too, that in addition to this survey that's going to be asking the same questions of everybody, that we'll spend some time on each local jurisdiction's websites looking through the things that are easily accessible already to the public to be able to do some of those.
It sounds like one of the things you're warning us is to be careful in interpreting the information that we get back, and to not necessarily accept everything on face value. I think, for example, one thing that we might learn from the question that I mentioned earlier about what design standards do you refer to when designing facilities is that it may be that no one's going to be checking some of those standards, and it may be that that's a good reason to try to provide more information to the staff who need to design those facilities, that those resources exist. It may be as simple as trying to get information out to people so that they understand that, say, NACTO exists and that there's an urban bikeway guide that they've produced and that it provides good, useful information. Providing information about how what Caltrans endorsement of those standards means in their design of facilities. So it could be that one thing we'll find out is that there needs to be more information sharing that gets out to the staff people in Contra Costa.
And I guess also just some background on where these questions came from that we're using in the benchmarking survey is the OTS funded UC Berkeley Tech transfer several years back to create the California Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Assessment Programs. And we collaborated with NHTSA to create this benchmarking tool that, in addition to having the questions, also has a matrix of kind of where you are relative to other national best practices. And so it's not just kind of a brand new tool that we've created as part of this plan, but it's an adaptation of that tool to a countywide level so that we're not, it's a 2-hour phone interview we usually do as part of those. So we're trying to create this to be more of an interactive survey that can be done in more of a multiple choice format, but still with the spirit of that tool, as well as the kind of metrics that we can use to be able to not just get the feedback back with those survey results, but to be able to interpret them and give some hopefully helpful responses in terms of where we are relative to national best practices on those different questions.
Any other questions or comments? David?
Have you contacted 511 Contra Costa to have them put any of this information on their website? Just get another avenue for feedback.
We haven't talked to them for a while about this, but we could. I'll talk to Corinne.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right, James.
Related to potential milestones in this memo, is it known right now how long the web or the interactive web map will be open for public input?
You can tell about when we're doing the white paper. I mean, it's going to be a pretty long period, certainly through the whole time that we're doing the pop-up events, because that's going to be a lot of what those booths will then direct people to is, stop by the booth and here's a little flyer to go home and fill that out. So it'll be, I would say, at least 6 months or so it'll be open.
All right, any other questions, comments, or anything from Megan, Brad?
Nope.
Thank you all very much.
All right, thank you, Megan. All right, we'll move on to item 8, MTC's Active Transportation Working Group. In here we have an agenda. And Brad, if you have any comments on the agenda, or if anybody else has any comments.
No, I will say that the Berkeley Bike Plan update presentation was pretty interesting, including their use of this level of traffic stress, which is a concept we'll be using as well on some of the major streets in Contra Costa. One of the things, and you will not be surprised to hear this, one of the things that they found is that you can have a street that's got a low level of traffic stress, and then you come to a intersection of a street that has a high level of traffic stress, and that that you've got some places where you really need to focus some of your attention. Say if you've got people riding their bikes downhill down Dwight, and then you hit San Pablo Avenue. Dwight's not the right street. I haven't been in Berkeley for a while, so I can't remember. There's a parallel street to Dwight, but some of those intersections along, for example, San Pablo, were things that popped up a lot. And when you see a level of traffic stuff, stress analyses, you find that that's one of the big issues, that you'll have a lot of low stress streets in a neighborhood, but when you try to go from one neighborhood to another, that you have some real issue intersections, real problematic intersections. So that was a pretty interesting presentation. I think you can find, if you go, the Berkeley Bike Plan does have its own website, and so if you want to visit and see their bike plan, it's pretty interesting.
All right, thank you, Brad. Item 9, other business / information sharing. Does any of the committee members have anything to share? All right, seeing none. The last item 10, I guess we're adjourned, and the next meeting date and agenda, our next meeting date's on March 27, 2017. Ooh, okay, February. I guess we have a special, we have a special meeting. Was it February?
Yeah, I've forgotten the date.
February 27th.
Yeah. Yes.
Will it go longer than usual?
Could, but I don't. The last time around, I think we did it within the 2 hours.
Is that the only thing on the agenda?
It's the only thing on the agenda. If possible, we'll do it for less time, but you'll still get lunch.
This way we don't want to gather and then have to leave and come back. So if people could leave their 3-hour gap there instead of a 2-hour gap. I think usually afterwards the PCC doesn't meet in February.
That's right.
So just in case, save till 2, you're saying? Yeah. That's probably good.
Okay.
Clarification, please. On page 5-3, staff recommends the following schedule: CBPAC members review application January 23 through February 22. That should be February 27, actually.
I think the idea is that we get our reviews back to Brad a couple days ahead of the meeting so that he can put them together in his spreadsheet matrix.
Okay. Yeah, if you could, 22nd is 5 days before. That's a Wednesday, if I remember correctly. If I've got part of Thursday and Friday to put it together, Fridays, you can get it, that would be the 24th. That would be fine, too. Just as long as I have some time to get the numbers and massage them and do my Excel magic to do it.
And you'll, thank you, be putting together the projects that we should be reviewing, and we should see that the next day or so.
You should have gotten an invite to them.
All of them?
Yes, but all of them.
But which
ones?
Yeah. Which 13 or 14?
Any of the ones, yes, right. I'll send out the assignments.
Okay.
I may have to go somewhere this afternoon, but you'll get them no later than tomorrow. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Brad.
I didn't want to say it in front of the meeting.
That's okay. I will go deal with that.